Hello my lovelies and welcome to a new tutorial with me, Angela from Elfen Helden. Today we are heading back to the middle of the last century. That's where this little dresser in the so-called mid-century style comes from. My customer found it dusty and forgotten in the basement of the house she just bought and would like to save it. And saving is meant literally. It comes from a mass production where little wood was used but a lot of chipboard. During its time in the basement, it absorbed moisture, took on a musty smell, and the connections became unstable as a result. You can find a list of the products I use in the description of this video, so you don't need to write them down. Small tip, I secure all parts, screws, keys, and so on in a small container. Put a lid on and nothing gets lost. As always, I first clean the dresser with White Lightning from Dixiebelle. Cleaning is an important procedure for me, not only because I like to create a clean base for my work, but also because I can inspect every single centimeter of my project and discover all the flaws and problem areas. So scrub well, outside, inside, and of course underneath too. First White Lightning, scrub, wipe with clean water, and dry with a lint-free cloth. I decided to take the whole piece apart. The hinge band was loose and screws could no longer be tightened because the material was crumbly. Finally, I also removed the back panel because some of the brackets had broken out. Then the actual work finally begins. To eliminate the musty smell, I use Bonding Boss from Dixiebelle. It's a primer which can be used also as a stain blocker and a gripping primer. So it's basically two products in one. And here I kill two birds with one stone. I eliminate the musty smell because it's not only blocking stains, but it's sealing in nasty smells. And I also can prepare the glossy front of the dresser without sanding. Because of the smell, I apply 2 coats all around the dresser, inside, outside, top and underneath also, to make sure to lock in all the musty smell. After that, I'll let the whole thing dry well. Usually, depending on temperature and humidity, I let it dry between the coats about 1 to 2 hours, and I start painting then the next day after the second coat. Next, I apply a trim from Woodubend, the TR712. To do this, I first heat it up, and I use a heat gun for that, but you can also use just a normal hairdryer. When heated, the Woodubends become flexible, so I can now easily unroll and cut a strip to size. Since this trim has a symmetrical pattern and I want it to be attached in the middle, I measure the middle. I don't measure very often because a lot of times I mismeasure, but this time it worked. The Woodubends are applied using WoodUGlue. I use WoodUGlue from Woodubend and apply it to the appropriate places on the dresser with a brush. This glue should be activated briefly with a hairdryer so it becomes sticky. Then I put the trim on and press it in place. To make sure it really has complete contact with the surface, I heat it up again and press it down again. especially on the edges. If you're asking me now whether I always paint the bottom of my projects, my answer is definitely no. Because I worked with bonding boss here, because of that smell all around, and the feet are being painted anyway, it makes it a little easier in this case. The bottom, top and sides will be painted twice with Bunker Hill Blue. You can see that I turned this project upside down. It makes it a little easier to work in some of the areas. So I'll start on the inside as well, while I have it turned over. The inside of the dresser gets 2 coats of Dixiebelle Laminate, a delicate sunny yellow. The paint can be applied either with a brush or a paint roller. Because there are a lot of straight surface areas here, I switched to the roller, which is a bit quicker in the end. The shelves will shine in a slight contrast to the laminate in Rebel Yellow. Here too I will paint 2 coats. Before I keep turning the dresser back and forth, I decided to finish the dresser underneath first. To do this, I seal the bottom and the feet with the top coat satin from Dixiebelle for a beautifully satiny finish. The feet, which are actually made out of plastic by the way, will now get gold tips. For this I use the Byzantine gold pigments from Posh chalk and mix them with the Posh chalk pigment infuser. Depending on the desired opacity, you can use more or less of the pigments. It's up to you how you like it. I taped off the feet accordingly for a clear edge. Okay, it's time for a kiss. Thank you for watching. Let's move on. I'll check again to see if I've applied the gold opaquely everywhere. To avoid the paint running under the tape, you should paint with the direction of the tape. Use tape of good quality and not too much paint. If you don't want to take any risk, you can seal the edge of the tape with a clear top coat beforehand. Now the inside is sealed, also with a top coat satin. I use the Terra Tough for the shelves because it's more protective and harder than the normal top coats. All edges will become golden. Now it's finally time to start on the outside parts of the dresser. The sides and the top are first painted with 2 coats of Bunker Hill Blue, as already mentioned. The front flap gets a color blend from Bunker Hill Blue through Cobal Blue into Haint-Blue. I always have my fine mist bottle to hand to keep the paint moist for the blending. There are many techniques for blending colors. This is just one of them. Bunker Hill Blue and Cobalt Blue are close in color, so this color blend is very easy to create. The Haint-Blue, on the other hand, is very light, which means that the color blend needs a little bit more effort. I first apply the color in blocks and then go over the intersection of the colors with my brush. I make sure that both the paint on the project and my brush remain wet at all times. Long, even brush strokes, barely touching the surface. When the interface begins to blur, I start pulling the paint into the next color with even brush strokes. I work with both colors from light to dark and vice versa until I'm satisfied with the result. This is still the first layer, guys. Perfection is not yet important. I check here how far I want to take the individual colors. If I'm not satisfied, I can easily correct it on the second coat. I worked a second layer with the same technique, except that at the end I decided to use a so-called neutral brush, which is a dry brush with no paint on it at all. And this is to make the transitions even softer. Here too, I barely touch the surface. I always call it butterfly kisses. If this neutral brush has absorbed too much of the paint, I clean it just with a gloss in between. On the sides, I decided to use my pinstripes. First, I start with masking, and instead of measuring the stripes, I also use a piece of tape for the correct distance. I choose a slightly wider spacer, and why you'll see in a moment. For the stripes, I use Cobal Blue and apply it lengthwise following the direction of the tape. After the second coat, I first remove the tape. I love this moment. It's so satisfying. Perfect edges. Yes. After the paint has dried, the stripes are sealed before I get straight to the actual pinstripes. Now it's time to tape like a world champion. First I mask off the Bunker Hill Blue again, and then I put the stripes in the middle so that there's roughly the same distance on the right and the left. Now you can see why I use a slightly wider adhesive or a slightly wider spacer. For the pinstripes I mix again my Byzantine Gold with the Posh Chalk Infuser. Et voila! And since the infuser itself is also a sealant, there is no need to seal this, so the side is now finished. What you say? Do you like it? I'll also use the gold mixture with the dry brush technique on the trim. And now I have to mix even more of the gold again because I'll be using a cool retro stencil on top. The Posh Chalk Stained Glass Small. For large areas, I admit I am lazy and use the paint roller to stencil. Here I also use a little paint to avoid the paint bleeding underneath the stencil. And now here is the last golden edge, and then everything can be put back together. I've already nailed the back panel back in and repaired the holes for the hinge band so that the screws have a grip again. At the very end, the good piece gets a set of felt gliders. And so that everyone knows who's responsible for this, I stamp my details on the back. And in a flash, our little gem is finished. What do you say? Cool, right? By the way, thank you so much for watching until the end. I would be delighted if you subscribe to my channel and activate the bell so you don't miss anything from me. I do tutorials in English and in German, and all the products I use you can get in my shop. If you have any questions or suggestions, then feel free to leave them in the comments or just send me a message. For today, I'll say goodbye and I'll see you at the next tutorial. Ta-da, your master of disaster, Angela. Bye-bye.